Hey, I'm Reggie Ponder, the Real Critic, and this is the Real Critic Roundtable, where African American critics come to discuss, debate, and have some fun. Man, we try to do all of that each week. I have my friends here again. I have KB through the lens of Lady KB in the house, and we have Katia Woods from CupOfSoulShow.com. Of course, I always ask my friends what they're working on. So I'm gonna start with Katia first, because if she doesn't have something coming out on In the Heights, and she be talking to me all the time about Afro Latino, if she don't have something coming out on In the Heights, she's not come back on this show. What you got working on?
No, I had wrote my review is out there. Hey, it's that in itself, how some of that was handled is an episode in itself. But I did my part. I wrote my review. It's out there for people to read. I did enjoy the film. But no, I don't have specifically anything garnered towards that.
All right.
I do get to write about another Afro-Latino, and that's Coleman Domingo. So that makes me very happy.
So you got you have an interview coming up with him soon.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a piece for him for the Tribune, because he's from Philadelphia, specifically West Philly, and him and I went to the same college, Temple University. So what better way than to honor him than to have him seen in his hometown paper? You know, it's always, I mean, that always means a lot. I don't know about anybody else, but when your hometown, even if it's like a smaller paper, acknowledges you, then it's like, ooh, I made it.
I really do feel you. Even if you don't make it, you know, when we watched and I say the name of that movie wrong, but The Boy from
Medellin. Yes, Medellin.
See, I always have to stop and just let you do it. But when we watched that, you could see that it was real important to him. He's at in his place at home, and it does mean so much more when you're at home. Now, I wish, this is just an aside, I wish that my Chicago International Film Festival would treat me well, seeing that I am from Chicago. But anyway, that's a whole other issue. Moving on, KB, what you got working?
Listen, I got to speak to Jordan Christie, who is on season 2 of Why Women Kill. So the premiere of Why Women Kill came out yesterday, the first 2 episodes on Paramount Plus. You know, it was a shift from CBS All Access. I loved the first season. It was wild and crazy. I love that they tackled 3 different decades. This season, they're only in 1 decade. It's 1 story. So I'm curious to see how it continues to unfold. But my interview is out now for Nerdophiles with Jordan Christie. He plays Vern, you know, a PI. And also, I will have some additional interviews for In the Heights coming out next week. All of next week, really. I'm going to drop at least one a day for the most part, because, you know, I really enjoyed the film. So, yeah.
So I don't think you and I are connected on Facebook, and we should be, so I could share that on. I share your other stuff.
Oh, I don't have Facebook.
Oh, I was about to say, because I share.
She's that generation. We're the generation that MySpace, Facebook.
My bad.
Their Twitter, Instagram, TikTok.
Yeah.
Listen, I used to have Facebook, but in the past probably 5 years, I said no, thank you. And I have MySpace. You know, I'm part of that generation. My MySpace might still be active, to be honest. I don't even know.
No problem.
I had to get rid of.
I just like sharing your stuff when I can, and I know I do it from a Twitter perspective. So when I see it, I try to put it out there as well. So, all right, great. Well, let's get into it. Movie time. The first movie today is a movie that I did not see, but my friends did see. And this is the movie, and it was really, I want to say this before I say what the movie is. It broke my spirit that I couldn't see it. This movie is Spirit Untamed, and I'm going to ask you, KB, to tell us what this one is about, and I'm just going to sit back and listen to you guys.
All right. Well, Spirit Untamed really centers around a young girl. Her name is Lucky Prescott. Her mom died tragically when she was a baby. And so her father, at the time, who was also dealing with the grief of that, thought it was best for her to live with his side of the family and have kind of stability that he wasn't able to provide. So she grows up. She becomes, I think she's around 10. And it's time for her and her father to reconnect. So she wants to go spend the summer there in that small kind of frontier town where her parents were living and where they met and where they fell in love. And she is a true animal lover. She is much of a free spirit. She really don't listen well. The whole time I was like, now, lucky girl, you do not listen. I mean, people be telling you what to do, and you are like, no. And I'm like, okay, girl. But she befriends a horse named Spirit, and they go on this wild adventure in this journey. And so that journey leads to Lucky developing some other friendships with humans. She got herself a little girl gang, a little girl horse gang, which I was like, this is so cute, these little cowgirl gang. And then, obviously it leads to her, the repair, or maybe it's the start really, because her dad didn't really know her. So kind of the start of their relationship, I guess. I really like this cute little film. I mean, it's definitely for kids. It's definitely not for necessarily adults. But I said, this is so adorable. Like, never in my mind, would I have thought this little cowgirl horse gang would make it. But she gets some really dynamic friends, and Marseille Martin plays one of her friends in it. And so they got this little culturally diverse girl gang. And I'm like, oh, look at this. And the horses are truly wild. And, there is a lot of adventure. But Lucky really has a heart of gold, and she has a moral compass that really sees her through. And you know what? My sometimes boo Jake Gyllenhaal is the voice of her father. So, shout out to that as well.
I'm with KB. I saw this film and I was like, this ain't for us. This is for little girls. I mean, here's a positive. The lead is a young Latina girl. And there's no explanation. They're not going into anything PC. They just let her be, which I think is so important, especially for young girls. We always talk about representation matters, and it does. Marseille Martin plays one of the girl gang, as KB says, so that's also nice to see. There's diversity. Again, the diversity in this film doesn't seem forced. Like, a lot of times you're like, but what does the person of color do? Are they just there for background noise? And in this film, no. There is a lot of banter. I also like the fact that, yes, she does not listen. She is a free spirit. In the real world, she would have never left that house. But I do think this is a very cute film. And who cares that the animation is not Disney-like? And who cares? And here's the other thing is, this movie, it pays sometimes to do research before we start forming our opinions. Everybody, when they think of Spirit, they thought of the one with Matt Damon when he voiced kind of like the thoughts of the horse. That was a very serious movie. I did not think that was a kid's movie, because the kids are probably like, why is this so deep? Why is he always like, in anguish? This movie is based off the series. The series has 12 seasons. So you have the audience is coming to see this are the kids that grew up watching the series, or the kids that are watching the series now. They don't know nothing about this other one. So this is an extension of this. But I agree with KB. This is a cute film. And right now, let's keep it 100. There isn't one theater. There's one movie in theaters that appeals to all of your kids' ages, like to the little ones, like preschool, kindergarten, grade school, tweens. This is a
Quiet Place.
I'm sorry?
What is that, A Quiet Place?
no, but I'm saying, like, Cruella is, I would say, tweens and up. Whereas this, you can take everybody. And, as a mom, if you can find something where you can fit like 3 or 4 of you kids and we can keep you occupied, that's a thumbs up. And I always say this when we review kids' movies, I don't know. You can always tell people who are not near kids, who don't have kids, because they're like, this was boring and this. I was like, that ain't for you. The kids are gonna love it. Lego Movie, a lot of the critics loved, and the kids were like, they thought it was gonna be like stuff that they play with at home, and it's mega serious. So I think we need to take a step back sometimes when we're reviewing kids movies and say, who is this for? Is this for my 50-year-old? But no, this is for, and I'm just saying it right now, you're gonna be seeing a lot of Lucky toys come holiday season. Horses, it's gonna be like My Little Pony, the spirit version, and you will see a lot of young girls dressed up as Lucky for Halloween. So,
I hope so, because I loved that dress that her mother wore that she ends up wearing again. I love that
and the
dress.
Little sash she had on, she
see it.
Yes.
Yes.
And you know what's gonna happen? There's gonna be some Lucky themed birthday parties. DreamWorks is about to bring it all out. Listen, Reggie, you have girls. I raised a daughter. We know how that goes. We're gonna be in the store going like, "Oh, child."
Look, when my kids found out there was a thing called American Girl, poor daddy. That's all I want to say. Poor daddy.
If you have girls, I'm telling you right now, just bring the good credit card.
I had to sip tea just with dolls.
That was a huge thing. Yeah.
And I had to pay.
Reggie, it is using your imagination.
And I had to pay for
have
it.
Tea time.
No.
That's all.
No, it was okay.
Reggie. American Girl dolls.
We could do that at home. But then I had to pay to go sip tea with the dolls.
Experience. Yes, it's the experience, Reggie.
Well, I
say this as someone who had an American Girl. There is a hair salon for these dolls.
There's a doctor. They got a doctor. So you could take the little doll to the doctor. You could do it to the hair salon. It's absolutely crazy. What great marketing. So to get back to this movie though, is that it's really interesting that you say, Katya, about, us adults, these movies are made for adults. I must just be too much of a kid, because if it's a good kid movie, I'm all in.
I am too, but
I'm all in. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I think
I am too, though.
I think I might have told you, and I wonder if KB, if you saw this, but I've been watching and just finished the whole series, the 3 seasons of Jurassic World Camp Crustacean.
Oh, yes.
And I know it's made for kids, but I'm just telling you, I sat down, I watched one episode, I was hooked. And my child, Carrie, made me watch, Daddy, sit down and watch one of these episodes. And I was hooked. That's all I can say. That child is peeking in right now saying, why am I talking about them? But nonetheless, I just want to say, Katya, if Spirit Untamed is a good kids movie, I'm all in.
Again, as a parent, I'm like, I see these things. I'm like, I know you ain't got kids. This is who we are. In spite of us being the people, we're our kids' personal assistant, chauffeur, entertainment director. And our job is really like, when you get to a certain point, you're like, this ain't for me. I'm here. Same reason you go to Chuck E. Cheese. There isn't a parent alive that tells you they love Chuck E. Cheese. The day your kids grow out of that, you are like, hallelujah, I'm out of this, right? So this is what I'm saying is we do a lot of things. Of course, you're not going to let your kids, at 6 see The Conjuring. Like, that's not happening. But you do these things, right? And the bonus is sometimes when you watch these kids' movies, you do end up enjoying yourself. But most of the time, we are here at the service of our little people. Did you have a good time? Cool. Then I had a good time.
Yeah, no doubt. So so for both of you guys, watch it, KB?
It's definitely a watch it for me. I love that they have a girl gang, but obviously no matter how your child identifies, if they're non-binary, if they identify as male or female, they're going to have a great time. I think it's so relatable. It's refreshing. It's fun. The one thing I will say though is like, lucky girl, you got to learn how to listen. So the one thing when your kids are watching, you need to be like, now don't be like Lucky, because Lucky does not listen. Yes. So don't be like her in that regard. But otherwise, yeah, absolutely a watch it.
All right, excellent. Katya, is this a watch it?
I'm with KB. Enjoy the movie, don't live the movie, because Blue Cross don't cover none of that. Okay.
All right, got it. All right, well, that's it for that one. Next movie, and this one is Conjuring, the devil made me do it. Katya, tell me about this one.
So I had to pull up my notes because this is not my thing. So I have not seen the other ones. So this one takes place in 1981. The Warrens, the devil fighters, are trying to perform an exorcism on an 8-year-old boy. And you know what? This is not my comfort zone. I'm still healing from The Exorcist, which freaked me out because I'm a Catholic school girl. And I was just like, Lord Jesus, we are dying. And this brought me back to it. You know what I mean? I'm not one to say whether or not this is entertainment, but I just was like, who writes this? What is going on in your life? Where do you live? And I don't want to be your neighbor. Because if you're writing this, I'm going to question you when I see some things coming out of your house or coming into the house. I may turn into a Karen and be like, you may want to look over there and just check out the basement. It's, you know what? If you are a horror fan, you like that whole stuff is coming out of the wall, possessed, is it as good as like The Omen or The Exorcist? No. But if you like stuff being really creepy.
So if you like, so here's my thought on this one. I've seen a number of them, and every time I see them, I say to myself, why did I do that?
I'm asking that same question.
I think the title of this film tells us why. The devil made me do it. I just had to go check that out. But Katya, you already know that I don't like anything that's scary, and don't put me in a room that's scary and then somebody touches me or the seats, or you're in one of those where the seats do something, or I've been in one where the water, where a little squirt of water or something like mist. No, I'm already scared. But if you like a movie if you like your horror in a way that is tied to some reality, this actually might work for you because it is based on a true story. And so they're doing this exorcist, and it is scary. So when I walked out of the movie, the publicist is about maybe like 4 or 5 yards away. And I know the publicist is just waiting for a comment. And I said, don't ask me. I don't ask me. I have nothing to tell you. I mean, it just scared the bejesus out of me, and I got to go. I just have to think about this later. And I think for me, so firstly, I don't like these type of movies, but when you do them well, then you know that it's done well. And this was done okay. And I think it was done okay because for me, on a couple of reasons, a couple of things. One, it kind of jumped from thing to thing, and there was stuff that you wanted explained before it jumped to the next thing for me. And then I think that the other thing is that since I'm not a believer of these spirits, or I just don't want to believe that these spirits are there, I'd like, no, stop it, just stop it. There were a couple of things. I think that Patrick Wilson, I think the actors did a fine job in it. There was nothing in it that I could say that they did terribly, but it just didn't. Since it was based on a true story, some of it rang like a B movie to me. So like, where was that the heart of the film? I think I kind of lost in trying to convey where that horror was coming from. It just didn't.
You didn't feel fearful. Like, I feel like these other movies we talked about, there's something very scary about a child being demonic. And I don't care how old you are. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, with the whole thing, like I said, is with the Omen, I was like, leave the kid in the woods. I'm sorry. Just leave him. This whole thing trying to save him, But I think with this, I felt like you have this opportunity to do a new spin on really creeping us out. Because again, like I said, as you would think about this fact, something that's supposed to be innocent is really like not. And I didn't, like you said, is they didn't complete that arc. You know what I mean? They didn't go they didn't commit. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Whereas it's like, it's there, but they don't have you sitting on the edge of your seat. Like, whereas these other movies, and these other movies are like 20, 30 years old. When you watch them today, you're still like, all the lights are on. You're like, no. You know,
I don't know
you're
how
just
y'all
thinking
do it.
yourself, leave the kid. It's like Poltergeist. I'm sorry. You know, we're going to pray for you. We're going to mourn for you. But I just didn't feel like this had, and again, I'm not like a horror fan like that, but I didn't feel that angst that you do with these other movies where you're just kind of like, everything that's going on around you heightens your senses as well. Like, you know, when you already are a scaredy cat and you're like, this didn't do that. And that's why I agree with Reggie's consensus that it's like a B movie, you know?
And I think because it's this movie that has so much truth to it, is that the writers and are trying to figure out, how do you tell the true parts of the story, but also make them very interesting and visual. And they just didn't quite complete that for me. I was scared, but I wasn't grabbed, and I'm really happy that I wasn't grabbed. I know.
Yeah,
I also,
that's what you go for, though, right?
I know.
And that the people that enjoy this, you're going to be like, so that when you walk out, you're like, well, damn. Oh wow, okay, all right. I'm not messing with you. You know, I'm gonna take my chair a little bit over because I know what's in your head is.
So,
but yeah, I mean, if you're into that, God bless you.
Yeah, and so I know we just got through talking about a movie, Spirit Untamed. I think here the spirit was untamed, and also the writers as well. I'm gonna say for Reggie, I'm gonna skip it. But for people who like the truth, their horror embedded in some truth, this actually might work for you. But it's not memorable. I will tell you that. I don't care whether you like horror or not. I don't think that this is a memorable movie where you'll run out of the theaters for the horror fans and say, man, you got to check this one out. I even think horror fans will be like, oh, okay, it was okay. So I'm going to skip it. I'm going to invite KB to watch it.
Okay. Well, you know, KB's going to skip it, honey, because I cannot, not based on a true story and, you know, an exorcism. No, thank you. I'm okay.
Oh, that's so much fun. So funny. What your thoughts, Katya?
Listen, to me, it's like, again, this is not my thing, but if you're going to tackle your fears, you want to be shaken up a little bit more. And for me, no. But if you like all this devil and things, you know what I mean? Wear your crucifix, get yourself a little prayer circle on, because I do believe in spirits, you know, and go at it.
All right, there we go. All right, so we're gonna move on. We're still gonna talk about something, but this is just called a critic spotlight. I won't say critics pick, because mine is not a pick. It's really a spotlight. So I saw a movie this week, and it's called Under the Stadium Lights. It's a true story about this football team called the Abilene Eagles. And the year prior, they had a tough loss. And this year they're pretty good, and they're working toward winning a championship. It stars Milo Gibson, and it also has Lawrence Fishburne in it as well. They bill Lawrence Fishburne as one of the stars in the movie, but he really isn't. He's just kind of, I want to say, almost like a bystander in the film. But we've seen these movies before. These movies where they show us how sports really helps to get kids out of the situations that they're in, help them grow, help them build. So it builds. It's a story about teamwork, about brotherhood, community, and family. And many of them have moved me. They had some solid stuff in this film. because they looked at basically three characters. And those three characters would star quarterback, star running back, and then another young man who was like a freshman on the team. And they all had some kind of problems in their lives. One dad be dead, one a mom in jail, another brother is trying to get into the gang and do drugs and all other kinds of things and you know in that regard. So and then they had the white coaches and those coaches were going to help push these kids through, help make that bond. All of that actually sounds good, but the reason I said the white coaches is this came across to me as one of those white savior films. It just did. They had Lawrence Fishburne in there. He was a father figure, but he was a father figure working for a restaurant. And they would come to that restaurant, he would cheer them on or whatever, but there wasn't enough of him for that. And then the rest felt a little cliche to me, even though this is a true story. So how can I be mad at them for showing what these kids were really going through? I'm not mad at that, but there was something missing for me to really get into loving these guys and caring 100% about their plight. I cared about them. I didn't wish one of them ill will, but it just didn't grab me in the way that some of these other films have done before. And I think part of it is the structure of the film. It just jumped so much to so many different things because it was trying to show the story of the three characters and also the coaches and how they interacted. It was just, if I missed this film, there would have been no problem for me. I was like, was it a terrible film? No, but it just didn't add anything to the landscape that we know about these kind of films. So it didn't add anything. So it's just another film in there. So for me, I would skip this one. So that's me. Let's see who's next. KB, what you got? What's your critic spotlight?
So my critic spotlight is going to be the Netflix docuseries High on the Hog. I know that we have mentioned this, just kind of a couple of times on the show, but nothing really does it justice like watching it. So the full name is High on the Hog: How African American Cuisine Transformed America. And that's exactly what this is about. So I will say I went into this with not no expectations, but just, I'd say like a limited kind of knowledge of what I was getting myself into. And it's so much more than a food docuseries. I mean, it is about how we, as African people and African Americans, have transformed this country through the lens of food. So I did not expect to find myself to be wildly emotional, but I mean, there are some episodes in there where I was really in tears because they're just the way Steven Satterfield, who is actually the host of it, and he is a writer and chef within his own right, just the way that he experiences things throughout the series is just beautiful. It's touching. You know, he starts in Benin, and goes to the continent and experiences food and understands, kind of how, to Katia's point, and I think Katia mentioned this last week, how in the Underground Railroad, she takes the okra seed, and it's not because she is just going to have time to grow okra. That's not why Cora takes it, but it's a little piece of history from the continent, and it survives. That's really kind of the journey that we go on and High on the Hog. And so, he then, comes to, I believe is it Charleston? I'm getting my food shows confused because I also watched another one.
Charleston, South Carolina. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So he goes to Charleston, he goes to New York and Philly, and then ends up in Texas, and ending with Juneteenth and kind of our freedom and just the history of food. And it's just a beautiful display. Not only is it beautiful to see all of these Black chefs who are currently doing their thing throughout this country and putting their own spin on our traditional dishes. But it's also just beautiful to see the camaraderie and the community that comes along with it. And so, we may be from different places in the US, we may be from different places on the continent, as Stephen, showed, but we all have a shared history, and we have a shared past. And it's just a really beautiful display of that. So I would 100% recommend, maybe 150%, truly recommend this docuseries, which is streaming now on Netflix, because beyond the cinematography, which is also stunning, it is just so informative. And, if you love food, I can also say 1000% you're going to be hungry. Like the whole time I was watching, I was like, please mail me these dishes. How can I get these oysters? What is going to happen? Why is there no food involved? Why have we not reached the level of entertainment where we can sample things that we are watching? When is that coming? Because I thought we were in the future. We're supposed to have flying cars by now. So why can't I eat from my TV when I'm watching something delicious? Where is that feature? So,
I know, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%.
Listen, I think this show is a gift. That's the way I look at it. It is a gift. And I think I wrote in my review that it feeds your soul. And once again, why are we not taught about, I know like through my Latin roots that rice and beans and the seasoning came from the Africans, point blank, period, right? And the staple dish of our country, mac and cheese, was invented happenstance because a enslaved man who happens to cook for Thomas Jefferson went to France with him, and there, the French love their cheese. This is one thing, and put it together. But this is why I'm so glad you mentioned this. This is so important. Why we are taught, or not just us, but kids in general, about the contributions of minorities, because they really do have you feeling like we didn't do a damn thing other than get our asses caught and serve people, that have lighter melanin. And it's a shame that too many of us, we should not have to go to college to learn directly about us and our contribution. The episode on Philadelphia is how somebody asked me to write about it. And I literally am looking at it and I'm like, I know this tour. I know this walking path that he's going on. I know there's a whole display. The irony never leaves me. I'm like, in this area were Black people that were free and Black people that were enslaved. And I'm always thinking about, how did the enslaved people, it had to blow their mind, because they were told that that's all they
there's no end for you. Yeah, you can only be a slave. There's no end for you.
And just to think that you're seeing people that look like you, that are free, that own businesses, that are, and again, think about it, right? People that were told you are not intelligent enough to read or write, or there's no value in it, coming up with recipes without having that skill and serving president, generals, just putting together a whole banquet. So I'm like, once again, do you not see the oxymoron in it? Because, when you bake and when you cook and when you produce, you have to measure. So
they're doing it by hand. So,
exactly.
I will say
you're not learning this via a cookbook. So I'm like, when you hear people say that, like this idiot this week on Twitter, and I immediately was like, block. I don't want to see that again, talking about white people built and invented everything. I'm like, sir, you wouldn't have food. You wouldn't have land. Heck, you even wouldn't have rice if it wasn't for Black people.
So what's really interesting. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, you're right.
And also, we finally learned the difference between a yam and a sweet potato. That is important.
Because a lot of people didn't know that. And I will say, what it speaks to is the fact that we are revolutionary, and how we've always been revolutionary, and how even in the midst of just, the unthinkable, we were still able to create some of the most beautiful things that have withstood the test of time. And, when we got to the Houston episode, which is why they pulled me in, when we get to Juneteenth, it's so interesting because last year when everything happens, and now all of a sudden people are like, oh, we want to celebrate Juneteenth. I've been celebrating Juneteenth since I was born. You know, like I understand what Juneteenth means and that history, and understanding how food even plays into that history of freedom. And it's interesting because last year when I found out that like a bunch of people I know didn't understand what Juneteenth was, a bunch of Black people, like, you know, it's interesting because you don't know. So I just like to say, you know, Black history is American history. And you're right. I think, you know, kids should start learning more about this from an early age, just so that they know the contributions, to Katya's point, of minorities in this world.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to give Katya a critic's choice because she didn't took over this one. It just it doesn't even make any sense. I'm going to make a comment. Forget you, Katya. I'm going to make a comment, is that when you talk about recipes, that is why when you talk to your grandmothers and your mothers, that they don't know, that they make it how they make it. They say a pinch of this, a cup of that, a little bit of that. What is a little bit? What is a little bit? And so I'm putting a little bit of nutmeg in it, and it's not enough. You know, but
a little bit
they
is
know.
Just tap into your ancestors. A little bit is tap into your ancestors and figure out.
It's like, for real. So it's so interesting because that really does live for us, that we don't know. You know, we don't know what was in what's how much of anything is in there. You know, and then you'd be like, did you get your mother's recipe? Yeah, she told me she put some of this, some of that, some of this, and some of that, but she didn't tell me how much of some of this and some of that. And see, my mom particularly, because she had to cook for 8 kids, and that meant it was cooking for 9 people. I'm trying to cook for 2 people. I can't replicate this stuff. It's like, stop. You know, so I just wanted to mention that whole thing of really knowing how much.
I agree with you, and this is be my final thing on it. I learned how to cook from my grandmother, my Brazilian grandmother. And those recipes, she's no longer with us, but that time building with her in the kitchen at the time, me being young and dumb, didn't realize not only was that bonding, but she's passing down history to me. Do you know what I mean? Which I then will share with my daughter. And that's really how, like, I think sometimes when we look at food like, oh, this looks good, this tastes good, but this is beyond, this is forcing us to have a conversation. Why is this particular dish in my family versus this other family, they don't do this? Where did that come from? And that opens up the conversation for you to have. And if you're blessed enough to have your grandmother still, to have this conversation so that you can get the jewels in the history through this food, you know what I mean? It's simple things like the way my grandmother makes her rice. For you might be like, you know, how your grandma makes her biscuits, you know, she might use a little bit of buttermilk where somebody else is using, and you know, if you try to put some almond milk in there, it ain't gonna be the same. You know what I mean? So it's what Reggie said is, I said, I hope and that it forces us, inspires us to speak to our elders about our family history and our food, and that we start writing things down so they don't die with them. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah,
that
for sure. For sure. And unfortunately, your segment died because you don't get it, because you took over. So we are not talking about your segment. We are going to move on to the next segment. But before we do that, where can they check out High on the Hog?
Netflix is streaming now on Netflix.
And it's highly recommend.
Yes. And I'm okay.
Do not skip it.
Because what I was going to talk about should have been dead in 2016.
All right. So I wanted to get in 2 things. And one of the things I want to get in is that obviously this week was the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. And there were everybody, I want to say, did a piece on it. And I'm very happy that everybody did a piece on it, because there's different audiences and different folks to watch it. So if it's on a different station, you could not, if you didn't want to learn about this thing, you could not do it. Yay. So I was very, very happy. At first, it came into my mind, why would so many different groups do it? And then it came to my mind, but hey, how many people are just learning about this today? Just learning about what happened with the Tulsa Massacre, because nobody talked about it. So the fact that everybody's talking about it now, I actually applaud that, and I'm very happy. I got a chance to speak with Marco Williams, who worked with Russell Westbrook, who he did
Stanley.
Yeah, and Stanley Nelson, about his project. I also got a chance to speak with Deborah Riley Draper, who did a piece on OWN, for OWN as well. And then I watched, man, I'm probably like 4 or 5 of them. What's really interesting is that, KB, you mentioned that, look, Reggie, I can only watch one of those things. Totally understand that. I totally understand that. I watched it for a couple of reasons. I needed to learn more. I didn't know as much as I thought I knew. And each of the pieces that I watched took a different bent. They told the same story, but they took a different bent on how they told the story. And I actually learned that one of my friends, his family was the Stratfords. So, and I've known him forever. And so I didn't even know that that was his family. So I learned a lot about this. I think is really important. And this is what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that people who are probably saying to themselves, I don't want to see this, I can't see this, that you'll at least watch at least watch one of these, because I think it'll be important. So I'm gonna go to the first person who only watched one of them. KB, talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because when you watch, you will be like, well, where are our reparations? That's probably going to be the first question when you watch. But yes, I watch the History channels, which is called Tulsa Burning, the 1921 Race Massacre. What I did appreciate about this one is because, I do have, I don't know everything, but I do have a breadth of knowledge and a foundation on the massacre that I learned kind of years before the resurgence of this information. And so we've kind of seen a lot of depictions in pop culture. We saw it in Watchmen, and we saw an uptick in people Googling 1921 Tulsa Massacre after Watchmen, debuted. And then again, we see parts of it in Lovecraft Country. So, it's out there now in pop culture as well. And so I think it has piqued some additional people's interests. I do think that everyone should watch at least one, if not more, just to get clarity and understanding. I too actually had the opportunity to talk to Stanley Nelson about this, documentary, putting it together, our history, our legacy, and what that means. But what I did like about this one is how it tied into present day. Like what are we doing now? How does it tie into present day? What do these and I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the term that they use. It's not really survivors, but it's they call them something. I know that they're ancestors of those people, who were involved in that massacre, but I can't remember what it's called, so apologies. But speaking to them about like how they've moved forward and what life looks like, and not being defined by this massacre. I think oftentimes too, we are defined as Black people by our trauma, but often in this particular documentary, I remember hearing a couple of the people say, we are still thriving. Tulsa is still thriving. Like for us, Greenwood is still thriving, and they want people to know that. And to not be so, just rooted in the trauma of what happened in the past, but look at it as history and know that they are still moving forward and they're moving ahead and pressing ahead in the right way. So, I think it was a remarkable documentary. And I know that there was one that debuted on CBS on Sunday that I am going to watch because it is, I did record it, it is on DVR, and I do want to take a look at that one as well. But for me, some of the images are very challenging to see, and it's very hard to navigate this trauma. So I wanted to make space in between watching them to be able to feel or deal with whatever I needed to, or those, my family members who are watching it as well, to make that space before watching it.
Yeah, and I want to say this, KB, it really wasn't a dig that you only watched one. I want to say that for the record, because to watch these, it really does get under your skin. Like, really, how did this happen? How did they do it? I mean, it's just, and it's so much. So yeah, thanks. I'm glad you did watch it. And part 2 of the one on OWN is on the 8th. So I'm going to watch part 2 of that as well. And I like the fact that they actually put it in parts, because to your point, watching a lot of that, you'll get like, really. Join the conversation, Katya.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was coughing. But here's the thing. I'm watching this, and per usual, I'm like, it's important for us to know our history. Once again, it reinforces the fact that we weren't out there in the winds, lost after slavery. And that we did have, amongst very strenuous times, our own little piece of heaven. You know what I mean? Beverly Jenkins is a writer that does historical romance novels, but they're based on on real life, like Black people living in Black towns, not just in the Midwest, but out West. And we don't hear enough about that. Again, we're not taught that, you know what I mean? And also the part that we, once again, the white people who are in charge, is not a dig against white people, it's just the truth, decided to erase this in order to silence this, in order to cover it up. Kind of like what we're fighting right now, you know what I mean? And it's like, that's why you have all these generations that didn't know. I mean, it's heartbreaking to hear a guy say, I'm at the University of Oklahoma and my white professor is standing there and talking about the Tulsa Massacre. And I'm like, hey,
that didn't happen.
Tulsa, that never happened. And they're like, yes, it did. And boom, exhibit A, B through C, right? And again, when you erase things, it's easier to justify things. It's easier to other people. It's easier to, dismiss people. And this is why it's very dangerous when we start saying, you can teach this book, but you can't teach that book. You can't do this and you can't do that. And as a parent, I'm very glad that my child is older, because I don't want that from my child. I want you to read everything. I want you to grow up and use your critical thinking skills. I want you to be able to say, you know what, something about this isn't right. This needs to be done better. And why I'm glad we got the survivors to tell the story. And I believe that they're living this long for a reason, so that we can get the testimony and also all the other ones that they got. So once again, we don't have people saying, well, it was in the past, I had nothing to do with it, but you're benefiting from it. And the part that I really wanted to see is them also talking to some white people, like, do you feel as though you owe something to your cohorts? Because I'm sorry, $100,000, there's no check big enough that you can write to give the ancestors back what was lost. Because as the lady said, if that town would have been left alone, the wealth, the amount, it would have set up generations till today to be fine. And I really do, in times like this, I'm like, do you not feel as though you owe something to these people? Because you literally benefited of something that was done to them. And I don't like when it seems as though it's Black people's responsibility to solve something that was done to them. And that's the only thing that was missing a little bit. I didn't see the OWN one. I saw the CBS and I saw the CNN one. And that to me is a part of the conversation that's crucial, where white people don't get to sit there and kind of like dismiss it as in the past. Because even today, they're prospering. The Black people aren't, because they're divided by a racetrack and they're divided by a highway.
And I think to Reggie, your point, the Stratford Hotel, like I do remember hearing that, today it would have been worth, I think they said $100 million or something like that. And the generational wealth that would have been in the Stratford family, had it not been a casualty in that. Yeah, like I was like, you're right, Katya. Like, I think oftentimes when it comes to Black and Brown people, it often falls on our shoulders to solve the problem. And we didn't create the problem. So why do we need to find a solution?
So a couple of things that I want to go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off. It needs to be like home ownership. A lot of people frown upon it, but at the end of the day, majority of us, when you ask, what do you have to show for your hard work? 99% of us, it's our home. They don't even have facilitated path for home ownership, which is really important because it opens up so many financial doors because you have equity, you have something to trade with. And that's a conversation that I would like to see. You know what I mean? Don't build a house on a bad plot, but there were homes. All the descendants, you did a house.
There's so much that all of these pieces showed, and so I'll mention a few of them because we're getting close to the end. But it's very interesting to show at least 3 of them showed the connection between African Americans and the five tribes, Native American tribes. That was interesting for people who wouldn't know that, and having that association and how that impacted the land that they had, is that they got land that they were the only Black folks, so to speak, to get that 40 acres and a mule. So really interesting in this. So you get all this land and now it's not yours anymore. The other thing that I want to point out is that the reason this is important is not just about Tulsa. It's about how this has happened for so many other communities. So what I'm excited about is that the people who didn't watch Rosewood, because nobody watched Rosewood, because if you look at the box office numbers for Rosewood, you'd be like, nope, nobody saw that movie. And that maybe it'll open up the opportunity for us to learn about all the other towns and cities that this has happened to, because it didn't just happen to Tulsa. The thing about Tulsa is they got airplanes and all kind of other things that happened there, so it made it a little bit worse. But there were plenty of Black towns that were burned up and destroyed. So I'm very happy that we look at it there. And then the third thing I think is that you talked about this a little bit, KB, in terms of how it. Well, one of you guys talked about how it comes to current day. And this thing of running highways through our cities, because Tulsa was rebuilt. They said they rebuilt it and they got it back, the 30 to 40 odd blocks. But let's run that highway straight through and destroys the economy and does that type of thing. So when we talk about culpability, who's responsible, it's very, very interesting that we get to that. The last thing I want to make a point on is something that you said, Katya. I'm glad that most of them didn't dwell on the white people yet. We'll get to the white people next. After we tell the real, put out the evidence. It's just like going to court. It's like, you said, no, that didn't happen. Oh, okay. All right. Let me show you. Here was the this, here was the that, this was the this, here are the graves, the people who were buried, and so on and so forth. So we've established all the facts. Now we can really come to the table and say, okay, how are these people going to be compensated? That lady who's 107 years old, will she get compensated in her lifetime?
They're offering them 100,000, but I'm like,
I mean, well, one, that's not enough.
That's not enough. You can buy a house or whatever, but it's still like it's a compounded interest, the equity, all of that. Like, if you really start doing the math, we're going to be in the millions, like KB said. And to me, it's like, I don't want the white people's perspective about what happened, because we know how they skewed it and erased it. What I want to hear from them is, what are
accountability?
No, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. The mayor, the mayor,
she's 107 though. So like, she could die tomorrow. I mean,
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying?
That's
like,
right. That's
we cannot
right.
put it, she could die tomorrow. She could die today. Like, we cannot hinge it on this. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Well,
the white folks need to come out of their pocket.
Last word, Kachi, go ahead.
I'm like, the white folks need to come out of their pocket for her grandkids, her great grandkids, and the list goes on. And I don't want to hear, well, you didn't do it, but you benefited from it. So cut a check, everybody.
I am in total agreement. Well, I'm hoping that people will seek out some of these programs. I'm glad you taped the CBS one, because I didn't see it, and I did tape the CBS. Oh, I did tape the CBS one as well, and I'm going to watch that as well. So thanks on that. Last thing to kind of end the show on is to talk about the cancellation of shows that we like. And if they canceled My Girl McKissick, don't tell me they did. Don't say it. Don't tell me they canceled my girl, because I like her. Don't say that they. Oh, we not actually. This is not the last topic, because we got to talk about Run the World. But anyway, because we did not do that. But so hopefully we can get that in. But what's going on with my shows, KB?
Listen, cancellations are always hard in general. But when you are fighting for equity in the entertainment space and seeing yourself and your communities represented on screen, and with storylines that are dynamic, that are true, that may be hard to hear for some parties, but are still authentic, you get something like All Rise. And, to Reggie's point, Simone Missick is the lead as a Black woman judge, and they canceled it. Now, is the show dealt with everything from top to bottom? I mean, truly everything. How hard it is to be a Black woman fighting for justice and being in this position, to the Black Lives Matter movement, and to how being a judge does not help if you are confronted by the police. That doesn't matter, right? They don't care. They just see a Black woman. How that impacted her, best friendship with a white male, and how that caused strain because he doesn't understand, and how he is thinking if you just do what they say, it'll be okay. So there's so many different layers, balancing motherhood and work and guilt and understanding
and
relationships, absolutely. Navigating the challenges of it all, career changes, navigating domestic abuse, as we see, and how to kind of come out of that on the other side and learn how to love yourself and someone else again after having that trust just broken. So I mean, the show was absolutely stellar. It has been canceled by CBS. I will probably never forgive them for that, especially because, when they saw that some of the other shows which had lower ratings or poor ratings, they moved them over to Paramount Plus to give them at least one more opportunity to see what that streaming service could do for their numbers. This show didn't get the same benefit. And I'll say that's a true disservice because, what has come out as of recently is the showrunner of All Rise had been let go because he was racist. They had found, he was making a lot of racist comments, and they had to go through a large restructuring on the show. So I feel like if we're going to talk about reparations, CBS, then we should give them the opportunity to have a season where they're not trying to navigate getting this showrunner out, switching it up at the last minute, trying to get their footing in the midst of a really terrible situation for their staff and their team. I think that they just absolutely deserved a season 3 to be able to fully step into the power of what the show could be and not have those odds and those barriers kind of against them.
I want to say this is that the writing in it was good. The relationships that they had were all very interesting. I was pulling for a couple of those love relationships, and I'm like, oh, come on, they're gonna get together. But they did it in a way where they addressed issues, but they did it with people. They didn't have the issues over the people. They had the people over the issues, and they combined that to make, I felt, what was a compelling show, or since we're talking about being in court, a compelling argument. And I liked it a lot. But then there's another show that got canceled that I think Kati was like, how they gonna cancel this and not cancel that? Black Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, the CW has this whole thing about superheroes, right? They're more like DC. Yes, they're more DC, and but you have no black superheroes now. And KB was so kind enough to inform me that the spinoff has not been picked up. So, but they're all underneath the same umbrella: CW, CBS, all under Viacom, right? And I agree with her. You have you have been called on the carpet, CBS, for not having enough minority leads, and you have a show that I don't even understand how you can have a show with a black lead with a racist white man running it, but you know, that's Hollywood for you. Then you have this turmoil. So in the midst of flux, you still had good storylines coming out, you still had good performances, and you reward it by canceling it instead of saying, you know what, how about we let this new team have a year without turmoil and we'll give it another shot. And also, I hope that now that CBS lets it go, that the show has the opportunity to be shopped around to another network that might pick it up. This is where I really would like something like BET to step up and say, come and be with us, because they don't have a show like this.
That's still in the Viacom family, though.
And I think that would be really, really amazing. It's not an expensive show, you know what I mean? It's not like special effects. With Black Lightning, I do understand there is turmoil within the creatives. You know, they lost a show on OWN because of some things going on with Salim that have never been properly addressed. You know, we are in the Me Too era. You got to come clean or you got to say something. Being silent is not an option. But I did like Black Lightning. And again, there are some shows on there that have way more problems, like Lewis and Clark. We have a black writer that said there was some stuff going on here. So CBS, you continue to have problems with shows where there's diversity, but you're claiming you're fixing the problem, but we don't see it. So I agree. And, you know, my heart's a little bit broken. I mean, I'm more upset about All Rise because, again, we don't have many shows where a Black woman that is successful is leading. So I'm hoping, again, that they have an opportunity. I mean, I know she'll find work. She's phenomenal. But I'm hoping that she gets to live a little bit longer as the judge, you know?
Yeah, well, good stuff. Actually, I said we'll talk about Run the World, but we'll do that next week. We can talk about Run the World next week. I think it deserves its discussion, and I'm gonna love to talk about it with two women. So that's gonna be really interesting to talk about Run the World.
Careers.
I'm Reggie Ponder, the Real Critic. That is KB through the lens of Lady KB. That is Katia Woods, cupofsoulshow.com. And this is the Real Critic Roundtable. We'll see you guys again next week. Thanks, you guys.